Well, we're getting into our very first conversation of the day. I mean, it's a day for activity, productivity, and the rest. But we also keep an eye on the fact that there are a lot of people that are unemployed today, and by extension, they're not earning as much as they ought to earn if they were employed. So we look at this bill before the Senate. It's a bill to establish an internship and unemployment benefit scheme, essentially working on the framework. So what does it mean? This is a topic that gets Nigerians talking: unemployment, the benefits, skills acquisition, and the rest. We've tried it time and again. It looks like we've not really gotten it right, but this is a time we'll get it right. We're joined in the studio by the Chairman, Senate Committee on ICT and Cybersecurity, Vice Chairman, Senate Committee on Media and Public Affairs, Senator representing Ogun Central, Senator Afolabi-Salisu. Good morning, Senator. Welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, very well, particularly when we heard about this, the new bill. It's passed for second reading now, and you know how touchy unemployment is in Nigeria, anywhere actually in the world, because this is at the heart of the economy, at the heart of people's livelihoods, more importantly. So when this news came out, it was mixed feelings for a lot of people. Some people cheered, some people were wondering, what is this about? But we know that the work for this bill began last year, if I'm correct.
Yes.
You placed it before the Senate
November
last year. So let's talk about that, particularly how this is different from the NDE, for example, National Director for Employment. We have the ITF, Industrial Training Fund, and all of those things. Don't forget the N-Power as well, the N-Teach, N-Knowledge, N-Farm, N-Everything.
N-Teach.
N-Teach, yes.
N-Tech.
N-Tech, exactly. So how is your bill different from all that we have seen so far?
I thank you so much for having me here. Let me provide a context to this. As you mentioned, I represent the Ogun Central Senatorial District from Ogun State, where they stay with the highest number of tertiary institutions, meaning that every year we turn out a lot of graduates. And you see them not just when they were on campuses, you also see them when they have graduated. You see them at rallies, you see them on the roads, or the Monday morning, you see Nigerian youth idling away. So in the course of my campaign, on my way to the Senate, I came across a number of Nigerian youth, and they said they are tired of being given doles. They're tired of being given stipend. They want to be engaged. And I look at the problem, and I said, if you train someone and study pharmacy, engineering, whatever the discipline he has studied, 2-3 years down the line, he hasn't gotten a job, how much of pharmaceutical knowledge will he have in his head? To make the matter, to compound the problem for him, if when jobs become available, they will ask him to provide 2-3 years experience. Where will someone who hasn't got an opportunity to work in the first instance provide that experience? So why is this different? Exactly the same reason that you have mentioned a number of these initiatives. These are initiatives that are in silos. They have not delivered on the promised benefit to the Nigerian youth. So you have the silos here and there. They are not coordinated, they are not streamlined, and they are not impactful. And as some of the developments have shown in the country, they are also less accountable. So what is different here is, number one, as is obtainable in every part of the world. People talk about the status of the unemployed people, and it depends on who you are talking to. If you talk to the International Labour Organization, they give you some statistics. If you talk to the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, if you talk to... But the point is this: there's no family that hasn't gotten a ranking member of the unemployed youth in his family. Every now and then you hear people approaching you, we want employment for our people. So the first thing is this: you cannot even dimension a problem until you can measure it. So let's have a national database of unemployed people. For a start, let them register. And the good thing about this is this: any initiative that impacts on the majority of our population, and the youth constitute the majority of our population. So whatever intervention, whatever palliatives, if you direct at these people, you address a large population, percentage of our population. So the first thing is, let's have a national database of unemployed people. They register there, they provide their BVA, they provide their NIN, they provide their qualifications. When you have the database, the second thing is this: then you begin to have an idea truly of how many of these youth are unemployed, what discipline they have. So the second thing you can therefore do is this: in order to ensure that their knowledge, their skills don't become rusty. Why do I say looking for? I mean, the ideal thing is to provide employment for anyone who desires employment, but that's the ideal. But the reality is that there will always be a gap, there will always be a deficit. So why don't you create a scheme where you call it internship placement? And I can give you many examples. So you have people who have studied journalism, they're looking for places, they're looking for jobs that are available. Let them come and do some form of internship. Come 2-3 days at channels, okay, to learn about their job. We're doing Lagos Calabar Coastal Road. There are graduates who have studied engineering, they're jobless, they're at home, they've studied QS, they've studied town planning, they've studied all of this. Hey, assign them kilometer 1 to kilometer 10. You are engineers, come 2-3 days a week. Learn the ropes. You are getting experience. You are taking them off the streets. You are providing hope for them. If you also look at private sector organizations, okay, and I've come from Ogun State as well. You have our industrial, Ogun State is the headquarters of the of industrialization in a country. You have all of those private sector organizations. If you can give tax incentives for people to do roads, why can't we too give them some incentive as well to take this youth off the road 2-3 days a week? The difference between this and the other intervention is that you are not just giving them some stipend, you are tying that stipend to them also creating value for the system through this internship placement. So they go somewhere 2-3 days a week, you monitor them, you provide them opportunity to have some experience along the line. Then the third thing about it is you also build an ecosystem. So if small and medium scale development, small and medium scale enterprise development agents of Nigeria, SMEDAN, is supposed to also be helping small and medium scale organizations. But you know, some of them could not even afford some of the service they would like to have in-house. They can afford to engage full-time accountant, they can afford to engage full-time lawyer or human resources managers. But these are people, they're accountants out there who are looking for jobs. These people can afford to employ them full-time. Okay, why don't you also build an ecosystem? You're looking for a job, you are looking for an accountant, but you can't afford to engage a full-time accountant. You're also looking for somewhere to get experience to also get some knowledge. Let's attach you to this small and medium scale enterprises. You go 2-3 times a week, you get employment, you get experience, and you also provide the value. And when you do so for the small and medium scale enterprises, you increase their capacity to grow, and in turn they generate employment. So eventually, those who are unemployed, who are doing this internship placement, they will be on the first line of people to be employed when employment is also created. And finally, if you have an idea of the number of unemployed graduates and the discipline of study, it can also be retrofitted back to the admission policy. A lawyer friend of mine told me that every year the country produces close to 5,000 or more lawyers, but less than 500 of them are employed. You can say the same thing about accountant or other professions. So shouldn't we also be looking at, oh, we have a glut of this profession, but we have a dearth of this other profession. Now that we have a database, now that we have the information, can that also inform the admission policy in terms of the more people we take into the system? We must remember that these unemployed people, they are national asset. They are dormant, as it were, by not putting them to productive use. The easy way to put them on the pipeline for productive engagement is the internship placement, and then paying their stipend to give them hope. And then the renewed hope agenda of the administration will now become more meaningful to these young people.
So it sounds like a great idea. The only problem is that the fundamentals are wrong and not there when it comes to the country. So let's talk about funding, for instance. This will be funded, this incentive or stipends that will be given to these people. Our budget is in deficit. The federal government is doing all it can to get as much funding as possible. The president has been traveling around trying to attract FDI. They haven't come. What we have been seeing is divestment and companies leaving the country. Multiple taxation at the small level of businesses and all of that, and at the big level. So even the people you want to attach these youths to or these unemployed people to, the businesses are not even there or operating at optimal level. Did you factor in all of this and think that the timing is maybe not right because of these fundamentals I've just mentioned. So I've mentioned the issue of funding. I've mentioned the issue of ease of doing business. I needed you to address that.
Okay, let me put this way. When you talk about funding, you mentioned a plethora of intervention that we already have. The fund is already there. The only challenge that they are not streamlined. I mean, the recent development in the country where billions of naira have been mischanneled, misapplied, it's an enough indication to know that the money is there. What is missing is that these funds are in silos and therefore they are not channeled, they are not streamlined. If you put them in a bucket together, you will discover we have enough funding for this initiative.
Really?
I do believe so. I do believe so. I challenge you to take a statistic of some of the interventions that we currently have that have been disbursed that cannot be accounted for. And you're going to come to the conclusion that we indeed have the funding. All we need to do is to channel the existing information. The ITF, as we mentioned, companies are paying money to industrial training fund. And their major role is to train workers, those who are unemployed and those who are seeking employment. You talk about NDA, you talk about Empower, you talk about NT, you talk about all of these. I do believe that funding is streamlined. The second part of it is this. If you don't take out the 70% of your population, who are the youth, people who have all of the energy, the insecurity, you spend more money on insecurity than you will have otherwise have spent. So even the fact that you take them off the street, whether you talk about banditry in the northeast, whether you talk about Boko Haram in the northeast and northwest, or Yahoo boys, these are able-bodied youth that the country has invested in. They are idling away. They cause more insecurity challenges. You spend money on ammunition, you spend money on tanks, but they're not kinetic, which is to take this youth off the street. I chaired the Senate Committee on ICT and Cyber Security. Let me shock you. Do you know in some eyebrow areas in Abuja, the seat of federal government, there are schools where Yahoo boys are being trained, just like another underground thing. A case was a man was convicted some time ago, about last week or so, that's operating a Yahoo school. The youth that are idle are taken off the street. They're taken through the rudiments of hacking, of scamming, and they become security, not just in the financial realm, even in the cyber security arena. So the money that you pump into fighting insecurity, why not to use that money to address the root of insecurity, which is unemployment? And therefore, so if you ask me, you spend 100 naira to fight insecurity, when you could have spent 50 naira to nip in the bud the source of the insecurity, which is the army of unemployed people.
I needed you to address the ease of doing business. You've not addressed that.
No, the ease of doing business. You see, you cannot say because the ease of doing business has not been addressed, you are not going to address the issue of unemployment. Okay? We are not looking at, they are not mutually exclusive. You want to address the issue of doing business so that the businesses could thrive more and therefore provide employment. Hey, I'm on the same page with you on that. But while you are doing that, even at the best of times when the ease of doing business is at its peak, you are still going to have some people who are not employed anyway. So unemployment benefit scheme, place them on internship, can never be out of fashion. Whether you have the businesses operating at the full throttle or you just have challenges with the ease of doing business. So they are not mutually exclusive. I fully support creating an enabling environment for private sector to thrive. But even in the best economies, they see unemployment, and they still provide unemployment benefit to their youth that are not employed.
Well, Senator, some would say that your optimism is unsurprising. I mean, the bill has got your name on it, and you perhaps take credit for it if it sailed through. But that is if it ever sailed through. You talked about the interventions that the past administrations have provided, that they're there, but they're just not well channeled. If we refer to those ones, the Empower scheme in the first place, the youths were owed several months, which have only begun to be, the resumption of payment has only begun in recent times. So for those who are approaching your bill with a huge dose of skepticism, who are saying that, look, even the Student Loan Act has not taken off. The students have not begun to be paid. Will this ever get off in the first place? Is it just not movement without motion? What would you say to that?
There's a huge deficit gap between the government and the governed, and it permeates almost all phases of our national life. But I have very good news for Nigerians. This bill was not a bill for grandstanding or self-adoration. This is a bill that came from the request of the youth. And what we're going to do, that's past second reading, we're going to go into public hearing where the stakeholders will come forward. We're going to invite the organized private sector, we're going to invite the labor, we're going to invite the youth themselves. We're also going to invite the existing interventions. This is not an attempt to create a new bureaucracy, to even see whether we can straighten this within some of the existing institutions and infrastructures. One of the things that has been missing is the issue of data and information. You mentioned some of those interventions. The question is, can the government of those institutions provide a list of the people who have benefited from this? Therefore, so the first thing we're going to do is to even create a database that will also allow us to report periodically to know that, oh, this set of unemployed people that are attached to this organization, to that organization. And we also ensure that they are also not being exploited through periodic reporting. The dose of enthusiasm about it is that because the youth themselves, they want this bill. And I also say that ultimately, when you put this youth, we take them off the street. When you put this youth, you give them an opportunity to have experience. Even when they just become available, they are in good stead to be employed. Rather than to have, the tragedy is this, the current tragedy is this. Somebody has graduated, as we speak now, that people have graduated for 5 years, they haven't gotten a job. And when they just become available, number one, they haven't gotten the experience. Number two, they're even outside the age limit that they could have gotten a job. So I agree with you, there's skepticism, but I'm also aware that it's not just about my own bill, it's about the bill of the entire Senate and the National Assembly. You see the support expressed by my distinguished colleagues, and I thank them and I thank the leadership of the Senate. So this might have come with my name, but I can say that everyone who spoke that day, they spoke in support of this bill, because there's no senator that we're not really bombarded with requests for employment. And if you can't provide all the employment in the first instance, what can we do? You also know when we register these people, they also become national assets in the sense that, let us, for instance, say we want to do population. These are people that they're already there. You know they exist. You can deploy them for those resources. If there are national emergencies, you know they exist. You can deploy them. We're not seeking perfection, but we're seeking something that will start and will fine-tune along the line. We don't have all of the answers now, but what we cannot doubt is the fact that you cannot keep those army of people on the street and expect to have a secure country.
Senator, I'm trying to really separate what this does from what the previous ones have done or are doing, and it's important to clear that out so we know where we're headed. And you talked about them working in silos. By the way, when you said that they don't train and pay, a lot of these programs also give vocational training and give stipends as well. We remember the controversy around the 774,000 jobs. The former Minister of State for now current Minister of Aviation, remember the issue you had with the Senate. The Empower, the N-Teach, and the rest, they also provide some sort of training and stipends as well. And they have their own database. In fact, from time to time, we get messages from those people in the scheme saying this is the issue and all of that. So there are databases for each of them, ITF, NDE, Empower, and the rest. So speak to us. This new bill, it's still a bill, by the way, it's not being finalized yet. Are you going to create an agency out of it? An agency will be created out of it, I imagine.
Let's put it this way. There'll be a secretariat.
There'll be a secretariat.
There'll be a secretariat.
So what will it be called? According to the bill, what will the secretariat be called, which will be an agency anyway?
It should be an agency, and as I mentioned to you, it could actually be a collapse of some of the existing agencies.
So are they written in that bill? Is that possibility in that bill?
Oh, it is, of course.
Or you're waiting for the public
No,
hearing?
it is in that bill already.
So what does it say? Does it say that they will collapse ITF, ND, maybe the Empower, absorb them and make them one?
What we put in the bill now, there will be sectorate that will look at some of the existing infrastructure, some of the existing agencies that can be collapsed into that sectorate. And for some of organizations and agencies who are stakeholders to also have representatives in that sectorate. Obviously, you're going to have like a chief executive of that organization. You're going to have a secretariat, and that organization, because you're also going to get your organized private sector to be participant. I imagine that you're going to have the organized private sector to also be represented on that. You're also going to have the youth to also be represented. So the difference is that we have 3 of you here now. So just imagine that we're conducting this interview, and 3 of you are not agree on what exactly you want to do. You want to ask me. You are asking questions on the different things. Asking questions on different. You'll be asking questions, but we are going nowhere because there's not a harmonized approach to it. All of those interviews that we mentioned, let any of them tell you today, okay, this is that the people that we are provided these interventions to, the training we are provided to them, this is the transfer they have made after the training. The stipend we are provided to them. In some cases, you have one individual benefiting from all of those interventions.
And it speaks to the influence of politicians as well, because some of those things, they've been said to be reward for those who voted you. So you tell your constituents, don't worry, I have secured 20 jobs for you. Isn't that what we'll have with this?
No, absolutely no. The difference between this and the previous one is, as I mentioned to you, you have a situation where somebody says, oh, there's Empower. Oh, give me 20 Empower. Oh, I have a... In this instance, the difference is that the unemployed graduate themselves would be the one to enroll. You have similar things in the UK and the US, the unemployment.uk.co. That unemployed people, they will be people to go there and register. And as they register, you have a list, you have a database of the people who are seeking employment. And when there are interventions, you can direct your interventions more specifically to them, rather than interventions happening in different spheres. We have a database of people who are unemployed. We want to direct intervention to them. These interventions will be in terms of stipend, but we're not just paying stipend. The difference between this and the other programs are the stipend is also attached to a responsibility. We're not just paying you a stipend and say, okay, just go. We're paying you stipend, but we're also attaching you to somewhere where you also, remember, we're talking about unemployment benefits, not just unemployment stipend.
Senator.
So we are paying you, and then we're also attaching you to organization where you are going to get some experience.
Senator, the issue I perhaps feel that we're all having is the issue of implementation. Is it really novel? Maybe not. Maybe the approach may be tweaked a little bit differently. I haven't seen how some of these things are susceptible to fraud, to interference by the political class which you belong to. I'm not saying you in particular, but you know what I'm talking about. Don't you think what may work more effectively is to backtrack a little? I know that universities or institutions have, is it CWES they call it now, industrial attachment.
CWES.
Rather than this and complaining that people graduate and they don't have jobs, why don't we review our curriculum and implement some of these ideas within the CWES or whatever system is called, which the institution has already provided for, instead of waiting for them to now graduate and begin to look at all of this great idea they are putting forward, but within our system, which the fundamentals are not right, may be susceptible to another failure.
Okay, 2 things. You mentioned about curriculum, and I mentioned that earlier on. When you have an idea of the people who are unemployed, as I mentioned to you earlier on, and the disparity in terms of what the industry wants and what our universities are producing, you can retrofit that back. But the second part of it is this, and you also mentioned the student loan earlier on. The student loan, if you ask me, is the supply side of it. What do you want to do with the student loan? You want a system that will ensure that our university system, our teaching institutions, they run with minimal interruptions, meaning that you are even going to produce more graduates if the student loan works, and as we hope it's going to work, meaning there will be less strike by ASU, there will be less disruption to academic calendar, so you're going to produce more graduates. If you produce more graduates, even if you correct their curriculum, there will still be a gap between the jobs that are available and the number of people seeking job. What will be different? One of the things that will be different, and I say this now as the chairman of Senate Committee on ICT, and I think one of the things we have not done, which we are emphasizing we should do now, is to automate some of the government processes to minimize the discretion that government officials, public officials have in trying to process your student loan as an example, or even to match with the available opportunities. There was a time in this country that if you wanted to even travel to Abuja, you would need to talk to a town to get to a ticket at the airport. You probably would need to go to one or two places to buy the ticket. You can buy your ticket online now. It eliminates touting. It eliminates discretion of the ticketing officer whether to sell to you or not. The more technology we deploy, the more automation we deploy, whether to the student loan or to this unemployment benefit scheme, the less the discretion that the public officers have in terms of whether to grant or not to grant. When we do so, it will totally, well, not totally, it will minimize greatly the influence of individuals to determine who gets what from the system. So I think that's the direction we need to focus on. Automate some of these processes, minimize discretion, reduce cost of governance, and then also ensure that you provide equal opportunities. And I think that will also be the heart of this, and that's why the number one item there is to create a database of the unemployment. And this database will also be initiated by the unemployed people themselves, that the people who are going to go there, they don't need to go and meet someone and say, oh, when we do this, remember I keep saying the ecosystem. When we do this, even the national identity registration process will also receive a boost, because you will not to benefit from this, you need to be registered with NIMSI. You need to have you cannot benefit from a social security system, whether in Nigeria, UK, or US, without having a social security number that uniquely identifies you. So when we begin this process, it's not just about employment, it's not just about placement, it also has impact on other elements of our ecosystem that will help us to build a digital society.
Absolutely. The bill comes with so many implications that make us continue to look at all the different areas to wonder if it has been well thought out. Without overflogging the issue, just something for you to reflect on, Senator. You talked about the possibility of collapsing the structures from what we currently have as existing interventions, in the area of unemployment. And that makes me wonder if management will now be different if we still have all of the issues that we have with the current interventions in the form of the Empower scheme. So would it be just a change of nomenclature, but with the same problems of political interference that my colleagues have spoken about? But beyond that, looking at if this bill is implemented and it becomes an act in the first place, what about the implications for the youths when they are weaned off of this system? Do we have the store of value in both the public and private sectors that will absorb them, such that they are not weaned off of the system and there is no structure to absorb them into permanent employment? Are you also reflecting on that aspect as well?
Thank you very much for that question. One of the things, first and foremost, it's not just about a change of nomenclature. No, far from it. This is the first time we're looking at something holistically, and we're also looking at the ecosystem around it. I mentioned to you earlier on, you are on the unemployment database, you haven't gotten a job, and they also have small and middle scale enterprises that require your services, but who cannot afford to pay you, to engage you full time. We deploy there. I mentioned to you about some government projects that we can also get some of these people to go and learn and gain experience. I talked to you about some national projects, including population census as an example, where we have this army of people. And because we know them, because they're also expecting further benefit from government, if they're on this database, they are likely to also conform and behave in certain ways that will allow them to have the opportunity. What we are providing for them, it's not a terminal point. What we are providing for them is a transition path of full employment. Transition path in the sense that we are providing them opportunity. You have seen graduates. You guys are journalists. You have seen graduates of our mass communication department that cannot string together a report. Now, if such person who are just finished cannot string together a report, 2-3 years down the line, what will be left of him in terms of knowledge? But if he has an experience to come and learn even 2-3 days, 2-3 days a week in the channels, in some other media houses, he's getting the experience. And ultimately, when jobs become available, he has gotten the skills. So it's not just, we are not winning them off to say, okay, yes, it is not a one-off thing. And I need to say that. It's not something that you do for 6 months, 2 months, and then you take them off. You provide a path to employment, and that's why every other thing you have spoken about in terms of ease of doing business, ultimately is to provide an environment for businesses to thrive. But in the meantime, what do you do with this army of people? We need to take them off the streets. We need to give them hope. We need to place them where they learn skills.
Senator,
and they also earn some stipend.
We have to wind down. This is a big topic that we needed to drill deeper into, but there are other issues of national importance that we also need to get your thoughts on. But just quickly, how much is the proposed stipend?
No, it has not been determined now. Remember that.
Would it be more than a minimum wage or less than a minimum wage?
I won't be able to, as they said, the devil is in the details. The minimum wage, as we are talking about, is being negotiated. And we're not going to put that figure in a bill. You don't put an amount in a law. What you do is to provide regulations that will allow those stipends to be reviewed from time to time in line with whatever the inflation trend is.
Well, let's talk about the other part to this, and it ties with your lawmaking process. How can Nigerians trust you in this process? Because we saw what happened with the Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention Act Amendment Bill. It was laid before the Senate, and Nigerians trusted the Senate. Like, you people will go through it and look at all of the fine details. It was presented last year, past second reading in October. Then it was committed to, referred to Committee on ICT, National Security and Intelligence, which you sit on, which you chair.
Yes.
Senator, why did you allow the 0.5% levy to go through? Or more importantly, who does the 0.5% apply to?
I think that, let me provide some clarification. What we did was an amendment of an existing law. The Cybercrime Act was enacted, I think, by the 8th Senate in 2015. And the 0.5% was there. It wasn't something that was introduced by us. Indeed, the whole essence of the current amendment was not about the percentage. It was about some development that had taken place since 2015 and now. 2015, when the bill was when the law was enacted, there was no artificial intelligence as pervasive as we have it now. There was no quantum computing. The cloud computing was still in infancy, and a number of development. Those were the objectives of the amendment that were done in 2023. The 0.5% had always been there. Indeed, what happened was that the bill contained some vague provisions, including that 0.5. Instead of putting it as 0.5%, what was in the bill? And I challenge you to go and look at the act. What we had there was 0.005.
In 2015.
In 2015?
Yes, I'm looking at the act.
And that's been interpreted as one of the discrepancies in the bill that many do not understand. So what's the difference between 0.05 and 0.5?
The 0.005, just like every other thing, was vague. So when we amended the act to bring in development, particularly that relates to advances in technology, advances in cybersecurity threats, we also now look at some of the existing provisions that were vague. One of the existing provisions that was vague was the 0.005. 0.005, what does it mean? In most laws, what you have is a percentage that is clearly stated. So it wasn't something that was introduced. The amendment didn't introduce that. It has always been there since 2015.
Senator, Section 44 in that 2015 is what you're talking about.
Yes.
So you moved it from 0.0005 to 0.05
percent.
Yes. What's the difference?
0.5. No. Because I need to, because she's asking an important question. Mathematically, it's different. We understand. Maybe Nigerians would have tolerated that, but we need to know the rationale behind going from 0.0005, just hold on, sir, to 0.5. That's on one hand. And it referred us to exactly what that meant in the schedule, which I'm going to read. The second schedule, businesses which section 44.2, subsection 2A refers to are, you help us interpret this. That's, I'm reading 2015,
Yes.
GSM service providers and all telecommunication companies, internet service providers, banks and other financial institutions, insurance companies, and Nigerian Stock Exchange. Which is why I want to feel that people have this particular bill more available to them than the 2024 that was amended. So people are saying they are not supposed to be the ones paying. It's supposed to be these institutions I mentioned. Maybe we need that clarity now that you're here. You're the chairman of that committee.
Two clarifications. Number one, I think the president has done the right thing because I think that was a misinterpretation. The levy was not meant to be applied to individuals. It was meant to be applied to corporate organization transactions, and those transactions, as you have identified them. I think that was a misinterpretation, and then the CBN gave a wider interpretation to it, and they thought it was going to apply to individuals. That's number one, and I think that's why it has been suspended, because it was wrongly interpreted.
It was ready for an official confirmation, though,
yes,
from the presidency.
So the CBN wrongly interpreted it by directing banks to implement it
for individuals.
For individuals.
Yes, and that's why you have even the Senate Committee on National Intelligence and has issued a clarification on that. I remember that was also a Synod Advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, has also given interpretation to that. So I think that was a misinterpretation of that, and that has led to some of these.
I don't think we have seen any official communication.
We need to have that official
from the CBN who gave that directive admitting that it was an error.
But
is that what you mean?
The Senate has issued a clarification on that.
No, the directive did not come from the Senate. It came from the CBN.
No, well, if the president, the CBN reports to the president. Okay. If the president has directed suspension of that,
reported to have directed.
Yes,
because there's
we
no
have not seen anything official. That's why we're careful.
Either from the CBN, or from the Ministry of Finance, or from the presidency.
I am sure that thing has been suspended, but again, it's not for me to communicate on behalf of the presidency.
The president should put out a statement.
But that's a clear issue that this thing has been wrongly interpreted. And getting back to what you said earlier, the intendment of the law was 0.5%. There's no law where you put 0.005. You know, 0.5
is half of one
percent. That's what was intended. Okay, but if you put 0.5 and you divide by 100,
you get 0.0.
You get 0.00.
Okay.
It's 5. So, and I think the 2015 Act was the very first time the Senate was enacting a Cybercrime Act. And if you look at, you have the original Act.
Yes, I do.
You see a lot of errors, repetitions in the Act, but it was hardly passed. And it was important to be passed at that point because we needed. I mean, I was in the Senate then, but the Senate is a continuum. That was the 8th Senate. So when we came, there were a few things we wanted to correct. Number one, artificial intelligence and a number of advances that have come, which we also need. In the past, if somebody commits an act, you can trace it and say, hey, you develop this software, you do this. But in an era where a machine can do something to assume the position of a human being in form of artificial intelligence, you also now need to also factor that in. These are some of the reasons that inform the need for us to amend the Act.
Right.
And therefore, the 0.5% or 0.5% was not a new addition at all.
But what we're seeing,
so are we taking it from you, Senator, that this is not directed at individuals like us?
No. Yes.
Because we're taking it from you now.
I mean, and I can even forward to you what the Senate Committee on National Intelligence has issued. We have issued a clarification on that.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like you to react to this, even though that has implications for the corporate bodies that this is directed to. That's another conversation entirely. Let me just bring to your notice that they're also complaining of heavy taxation. But there's this view that the National Assembly, when considering such bills similar to this one, usually incorporates a taxation implication that will fund that bill should the need for an agency be created. Listen to this. It comes as a result of a strain, this cybersecurity levy, a strain in the nation's revenue, and it is a taxation measure put in place to sustain certain parastatals. So is that the thinking of the National Assembly in charging in the Cybersecurity Act of 2015 and in the CBN's directive to charge this cybersecurity levy?
First of all, we need to recognize that the cyber threat, cyber security is as important, if not more important, than even the security challenges on the terrestrial plane. Everybody will easily understand why we need to charge to create a police trust fund, because they can see the police. Everybody will understand why we need to create an education trust fund, because they can see education. But in the current society where we are now, the cybersecurity is as important, if not more important. You're a journalist, you listen to the news now and then, one country attacking the other country in the cyberspace, shutting down the businesses in other countries. The warfare is not only on the terrestrial plane now. So we needed some form of funding for the cyber crime, for the cyber security of the nation. And it's not just about interaction between people. Right. It's also about interaction about people. Something happened a number of times. Maybe these are not in the public space. Institutions, national institutions, critical national institutions need to be protected. So just imagine if some cyber terrorists attack our communication system in the country. Everything will grind to a halt. So there was a need for some special funding for cyber security, but we can debate it as to whether, this is the right time to do so, right, or whether we need to look at it in the context of other taxes. And
I think that's the
good thing is that there's a commitment for that government that is streamlining our taxes. And I'm sure they'll probably look at this and other taxes that we have and come up with a, and luckily enough, they've said we have over 60 or 80 taxes in the country. Only 6 or 7 of them are indeed very viable. So,
Senator,
maybe at the end of the day, we'll streamline this and we'll come up with something that Nigerians will be happy with.
We have to run now. And just to put it on record, that law should not be used to persecute either journalists or people who don't seem to be dancing to the tune of government or politicians. The law is made for the people, not the people for the law.
No, we did it. That's why during the public hearing, we invited the journalists. And the journalists came, and if you look at this cyber crime act, whether 2015 or 2024, it's not directed at journalists. I couldn't have directed anything at journalists. I represent the senatorial district that is creative of journalism in the country. I'm from the state that had the fortune of having 2 governors as journalists. But we must also emphasize, people who have also been victims of cyber stalking, people who have committed suicide as a result of cyberbullying as well.
So that's a very important point.
So
but that's not what the journalists are doing. They are reporting the issues. And it's the onus lies on government or whoever is responsible to go to court or to defend and say, this is the true picture.
I totally agree with that. Yes. But we must also not give freedom to people to just sit down, stalk people, bully people.
That's a given.
We must balance it. That's the freedom to populate whatever you like.
That's a given.
Because you have 100 naira data on your phone, and the impact on the victims as well.
Senator, we have to run. I know that this conversation is not exhaustive, so maybe we'll do this again. We'll have another date with you, but we'll have to thank you so much.
You have to commit to that as well.
Absolutely.
When we'll call you, come.
When journalists come, I come, because we're together.
There you go.
All right.
Senator Afolabi-Salisu, Chairman, Senate Committee on ICT and Cybersecurity, Vice Chairman, Senate Committee on Media. So that's why he's giving you the word. And Public Affairs, Senator representative.
So hold him accountable.
Thank you for your time on the morning.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time with you.
Absolutely.
I'll keep up the good job, channels.
Thank you.
We'll keep doing our best. Thank you. We'll go on a break now. When we return, we'll turn our attention to River State. Oh yes, River State. Well, it's a very interesting situation. So stay with us. We'll give you the updates.